All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I know this is the last session of the day, I believe, right before another keynote or Q&A before that. So I know everyone's full of energy right now. So what better time to talk about the road to information governance and avoiding the potholes. So just quick note, and I'll try and remember when we're done. You guys have probably been told this already, but Q&A will be after this session in a room just right around the corner. So we'll have time for that. A little bit about myself. My name is Colin Cahill. I right now am with Charles Stark Draper Labs in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I've been doing this sort of thing for over 25 years now, which is always kind of scary when I have to say that and put it together. It doesn't feel like it's been that long or that I'm that old, but I definitely am. So over the course of those 25 years, I have sort of bounced back and forth between consulting and sort of being in-house. So I've got about 10 years of consulting and the rest working for different companies. So the title of this presentation is The Road to Information Governance and Avoiding the Potholes. So hopefully this is really just drawing from my experiences over the last 25 years and trying to tell you guys some of what has worked well and what really has not worked well at all. So hopefully you can avoid it as you go along your path. So taking the first step on the road, well, I'll try and use that road metaphor as often as I can. Identifying the business driver. So why should we do this? What is the value for my organization to start executing an information governance program or initiative? So I really think there's sort of four core drivers for this. It's operational effectiveness, risk mitigation, compliance, and customer service and competitive advantage. So I'm not sure, hopefully you guys can see that okay. And the strange 9 that sort of is floating there, I'll come back to that later. That was a mistake, sorry. So starting with operational effectiveness. So the key elements there, when I talk about process improvement, workflow automation, transforming legacy physical paper information to digital. It's always surprising to me how many organizations still have significant value in their physical information. At Draper, there's probably a very large amount of that. In most organizations that I've been to over the years would fall into that same category. Increasing the value of information assets. So perhaps being able to tag information, identifying know-how for reuse. Those are all drivers for operational effectiveness. Looking at risk mitigation. So I think there'd be a lot of similarities with the previous presentation in this room on lit preparedness. So exactly that, litigation preparedness. What do you have? Where is it? Do you have policies? Those policies current? Things like email management. Do you have policies on email management? Email, last I checked, is still a thing. And I think what a lot of successful organizations have, they do have email policies where they are trying to identify substantive emails and putting them in the right places so that they can be reused, organized, collaborated on, and then getting rid of all the extra stuff. From my consulting days, I would say it was pretty common for us to make recommendations and help companies execute on an email management policy where emails that were not substantive to the business would be automatically deleted after 30 or 45 days, whatever the tolerance of the organization would be. But those are probably the two most common time periods. Backups. Are your backups just another repository or an archive, versus are you using your backups for recovery and then sort of cycling through them every 30 days or more? Tripwires in the process. What I mean by that really is identifying risks in the organization and designing processes to catch those risks early on and surface them for resolution as best you can. Looking at compliance, so the obvious compliance with federal, state regulatory agencies, customer requirements. More and more these days, a lot of customers have policies, requirements for their partners, and they want them to follow those. I will share an interesting story with you guys. About 10, 11 years ago, I was with a very large global management consulting firm, and one of our top clients was De Beers, the diamond people. We had very aggressive policies, so we didn't keep anything. Once a project had ended, we had about a couple weeks to get rid of everything. Maybe maintain about 2 or 3% of what was created for that project. Everything else had to disappear quickly. In De Beers, as one might imagine, it could be some litigation in the diamond mining business. So I'd say we probably had about 40 active legal holds for De Beers at any given time. And we were pretty good. We had policies, procedures where once those holds were lifted, we try and get everything going again. Well, we had one particular hold that once it had lifted, we started going back and getting rid of the material. Less than 2 weeks later, a new subpoena had come in, and we were always a third party here, and it was really asking for a lot of the same material, and we still had some from the prior hold. De Beers were not extremely happy that was the case, and the relationship with one of our top clients started to suffer quite a bit, causing a lot of effort and whining and dining and everything else for leadership to try and keep that relationship healthy. So maybe something that gets overlooked sometimes when you start thinking about compliance, but those relationships are very important. So whatever a customer maybe, whatever their requirements or expectations are, it's important to mention that as a driver. That story is one that I as a consultant, I used a lot too. So I've got a lot of road on that one. But it's one that when you talk to leadership, they catch it, and they get very interested in that particular example. Auditing, reporting, of course, moving on, customer service and competitive advantage. How would that be a driver for information governance? Well, enhancing search retrieval, improved data quality, faster decision making, Net Promoter Score. I don't know if this is something that everyone's familiar with, but many organizations will use this. So it really talks to customers, clients, when they get a phone call from someone else saying, hey, I have this problem, do you know anyone that could help me? They're going to tell them about you. And surveying your customer or client base to see if they would be willing to do that, the higher the score, obviously the thinking is the healthier the company would be. So being able to enhance search, retrievability, all these things can definitely affect competitive advantage and help. And there's real bottom line effect too, right? So poor data quality can cost an organization up to 30% of its revenue. So all these things I think can help get that point across. Obviously, you need, in the next step, executive support and ownership. What I have seen to be most successful is you need a steering committee to help make decisions and help drive that communication. Those steering committees are probably best composed of the general counsel, all the C levels, right? The CIO, the CISO, CAO, CEO, if you can get them, business unit leaders. Then you also need to supplement that with a working group or working groups to help do that analysis, the diligence, proposing solutions to some of these problems, and a good group to sort of compose those working groups. You could have the records manager, internal audit, compliance, PMO, all those sorts of groups. Next up, do your due diligence. This is something, again, from my consulting experience, this is one of those things that typically is not emphasized enough. A lot of consulting engagements that I have done, clients want to skip the assessment or minimize an assessment. They just want to really jump right to, if it's a technology implementation, they want to jump right to it and get that implemented. And in negotiations, what typically will get cut first is that diligence. But again, from my experience, when that happens, what you'll end up having is project run-ons, scope creep. That will affect the satisfaction, adoption. It's absolutely worth spending the time doing your diligence up front so you get it right. So I think I've heard this a lot in my life from grandparents and parents, haste makes waste. Never thought I'd ever use it myself, but it felt appropriate here. So spend the time, assess policies. Again, do they exist? Are they stale? When was the last time that they were updated? The processes, are they being followed? Are they efficient? Data quality. So we already know that poor data quality can be a huge and expensive problem. I would also say, again, from consulting with over 100 different organizations, I would say that every single one of them that I went into, we started asking about data quality, would say, their data quality is somewhere between good and excellent. And I would also say that 100% of the time that was never the case. You have to start peel back the covers a little bit and take a look. There's usually quite a bit of problems that can be solved around data quality. Security, contractual requirements, organizational structure, do we have the right roles and responsibilities in place? Operational costs, systems, do we have the right systems? Are those systems being utilized effectively? Seek a wider audience. So again, it kind of speaks a little bit to my point about the diligence being maybe too narrow. You definitely don't want to do that. Talk to as many people as you can, discover as much as you can. One thing that will be true if you do this is there will be a point in time where you'll be hearing the same thing over and over, and you can pretty much repeat it before it comes out of the person's mouth. But that doesn't mean it's a time to stop necessarily, because these are actually very good early on educational opportunities to talk to people, give them some insight into maybe what you're thinking about doing, how it may affect them. So it's again, I would strongly recommend it. Verify. As on the slide in the previous session as well, right? Certainly trust what you're being told, but verify it, because quite often what you're told may not be completely accurate. Good ways to do this, surveys, interviews, certainly report on maturity, where is your organization compared to others? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, you're a 3. Maybe you don't want to be a 5. Maybe there's no reason to be a 5 and a 3 is perfectly fine. Maybe you want to be a 4. Maybe you're a 0 and, well, then you need to go somewhere. So this slide is just, it's actually just to kind of break up the slides. That was really my intent. And just to show sort of the evolution of some organizations with information governance over time. Some of us are, could be one of these or another. I'd say more organizations these days are a little bit towards the right. When I was having a call with Nick prior to this presentation, and kind of reviewing the slides together, he looked at this and said, well, this looks like the evolution of InfoGov over the last 4 years as well. So perhaps it is, I don't know. Next step, to develop a plan with measurable goals. Some thoughts, examples of what those goals could be. Reducing physical storage. This could be off-site, on-site. Reducing digital storage. I don't know about you guys, but I would say where I'm at today, and a lot of the folks I would talk to, there's no shortage of digital information. At Draper, we have somewhere around 400 to 500 terabytes that no one's quite sure what's in there. So that's a little bit of a problem, and we can probably reduce it, and actually we're doing some of that now. Developing a data classification schema, reducing duplication. Throw out a number there for you guys, something that I typically have found over the years. Duplication at most organizations can be as high as 60, perhaps even 70% when you start looking at what's out there. And there's a lot of good tools to help you do that. Identifying and protecting sensitive information like PII, PHI, and some customer sensitive information as well. And developing an IG framework with local support. So depending on your organization, I mentioned the story about De Beers, right, for working with a large global organization. Our IG program had, of course, global oversight, that we then had regional and local oversight as well. So we had officers at the regional level and then managers at local levels, really to help drive communication, collect data, facilitate the execution of the program. Communication. This is definitely one of the key steps in the process of avoiding potholes. So I've communicate, can't say it enough. It is key. So developing a detailed strategy for communication in a plan. So who do you want to communicate to? Some organizations sort of target specific roles and will change the communication based on those roles. Others will do it sort of by a department or a practice area or a region or an office, or could be a hybrid of all those. What do you want to communicate and when? At a lot of places I've worked with, you want to be in sync with IT, legal, compliance, as far as when those communications are going to come out. Consider branding, make it sort of catchy and fun. I mean, this stuff isn't always the most interesting for a lot of general population within an organization. Going back almost 20 years, I was with a large law firm in Boston, and we were implementing several different technologies to help support what was really an information governance strategy. And at the time, some of you may remember the Matrix movies with Keanu Reeves. They were popular at that time. So not my idea, because I could never ever come up with something like this. We did use the Matrix sort of theme to help communicate and announce these technologies that were coming out. So if you remember, the Matrix sort of had like a screen kind of came together in blocks and went away. So we did a lot of that. We even got some of our leadership to dress up as Keanu Reeves from the Matrix with the black jacket and sunglasses. Well, those are special times and special people. Not sure you'll get that everywhere. But I think if you can come up with something creative and fun, it also just, again, helps with that communication strategy. And I already mentioned the coordination with other groups. Awareness and compliance. So really talking about education. Quick little aside, this is one of my favorite slides, the picture really. As I was putting these slides together and I had this one up on my screen, I can't tell you, anyone that walked by and happened to see my screen started giving me strange looks. So I'm thinking of changing it to my screensaver actually. I think that would be great. But education, again, who do we want to target? How do we want to target them? Strongly suggest an annual acknowledgement of policies, a program, baking it into an onboarding process, the compliance and monitoring, reporting against those goals that you would come up with early on. Suggest quarterly scorecards that would go to the steering committee for their review. I would also suggest, based on experience, that publishing those scorecards to the organization can be a very powerful thing as well. Shame can be a brilliant motivator, as can be competition, so depending on who you are. Return on investment, ROI. This is not necessarily a final step. I think it's something that everyone should be considering at the very beginning and all the way through. But again, we need executive leadership on board. We want to show success. We want to show value. ROI is a great tool to do that. So estimate your ROI early on. Many industry organizations publish benchmarks that you can use. Some that I would typically use are around e-discovery, right? So you can go and you can find that there are estimates on the cost in an e-discovery per gigabyte or terabyte. Great, so I'm going to use that, and I'm going to also calculate the amount of gigabytes or terabytes that we think we can get rid of, and maybe do some sampling of duplicates and convenience copies that may be out there, so how much we think we can reduce. We do the math, we come up with an ROI. Annual versus one time. This is something I think a lot of people kind of lose sight of. If you can show an annual savings, is something that would be, if you didn't do it, would be a recurring cost annually, but you're sort of being proactive in reducing some of that cost. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's game for every year. I'm adding it to the amount of money that we're saving versus a one-time success. Total cost of ownership is another thing that sometimes gets ignored. So if you're talking about, let's use a pretty simple example. Not many companies have their own warehouses these days. We do, unfortunately. But what would be the total cost of ownership of having a warehouse? You have the rent, the lease. You've got the maintenance, you've got the utilities, you've got the people. If we're talking about a server, right, we got the cost of the box, the maintenance, the support. So consider all the costs of where you're targeting and calculate the ROI. Don't miss anything that could be out there. Some other examples, so physical storage, real estate. A lot of my clients, when I was consulting, when they think about physical storage, they're thinking about Iron Mountain. You know, reduce the Iron Mountain storage. Great, yeah, it makes sense, let's do it. But we're missing a big piece. Most companies, I think the number is 15% of their office space is taken up by legacy paper copies. Again, do the math, calculate what you're paying for office space, how much of that is being taken up by paper, and if you can reduce 15% down to 5%, your ROI is going to be quite significant. Digital storage, the deduplication that we talked about earlier, the convenience copies that you can start to get rid of. You can really shrink and reduce servers, or perhaps reuse them somewhere else. Those e-discovery costs, the security breaches, as discussed in the last session, converting the physical to digital, there's huge ROI in doing that. Not doing it universally where it doesn't make sense, but where it does make sense, the ROI can be quite significant. And the retention that helps drive a lot of this, right? We're not going to keep things longer than we need to, legally or for a business purpose. That all helps drive things as well. And yes, we were asked to include quotations. So glad to see I'm not the only one who did this. I'm kind of an Eastern philosophy guy, so whenever I have to come up with a quote, I'm probably going to use this one. Again, I thought it was appropriate here. A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. So that is all. Thank you, guys.